infinite complaisance, people went to and fro over the earth about their little affairs, serene in the assurance of their dominion over this small, spinning fragment of solar driftwood, which by chance or design, man has inherited out of the dark mystery of time and space.
And before we get to this week's episode, I thought you might want to hear what people are saying about Jim Harold's campfire. So here are a few reviews pulled right from Apple Podcasts. Love the stories, and Jim is an excellent host and communicator. I've been listening to Jim for a while now, and it's rather soothing listening to a familiar voice. The stories are so intriguing, and I'm a skeptic, and it's still fun to listen. Love the Podfather. The format is terrific, the stories are great, and Jim is a true gent. His kindness and his reaction to callers make the show. So as aforementioned by some of his listeners, if you're looking for another fantastic podcast to binge that features real people sharing their real encounters, check out Jim Harold's Campfire. You can tune into Jim Harold's Campfire on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to Into the Fray. Well, yeah, Patrick, welcome to the show. I'm pretty excited to speak to you, and I hope that everybody sticks around for what sounds like will be essentially the culmination of our talk, which is something that, and I'm not going to try to give anything away because I don't even know much about what's going to go on at the end of the call. But at the end of your email, because I think we're obviously going to go in succession with your earliest experiences, and we'll start there. You guys need to stick around because he did have an experience later on. It was a purported Bigfoot experience. And even the people that were there with him don't know about what he's going to share with me today. And I don't know either. So I'm pretty darn excited about that. I'm not going to lie. Even though it sounds like it was scary. But anyway, we'll get there. So, Patrick, are you okay to start then with your earlier experiences while you were living with your family still in Colorado?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. You just want me to go ahead and just jump right in?
Absolutely.
Awesome. Great. Yeah. So I originally I was born in Arizona, but when I was younger, my family, my dad and my stepmom, and then my step siblings and my sister, we moved to Colorado. And we moved into this house I'm not going to give the specific location, but it's in Boulder County, Colorado. And it was a house that I believe was probably built like late 60s, early 70s. It was, 3 stories, had a basement, middle floor, and a top floor. And what we had found out from the neighbors before we moved, or after we moved in there, was that the folks that lived there before were actually foster parents. So they had a number of foster children that lived there. But after kind of talking with some of the neighbors, I know my parents had, it sounded like they weren't the best of foster parents. So we're not sure if there were just a lot of negative experiences that went on in this house, and that's kind of what caused everything. But that was just kind of a thought that, we had after speaking to everybody. But really my first experience that ever started in the house was actually just kind of a one-off. It was an out-of-body experience that I had. And when we first moved into the house, my room was in the top floor of the house. So I was on the third floor there. But so what had happened was there was one evening when I was sick. I'm really sorry. I'm really bad about being able to put timelines on things, like exactly how old I was when something happened. My memory doesn't really work that way. But I was a little bit younger. I would say probably around maybe like 8 or 9 years old. And I wasn't feeling well. I had been sick. And I went to bed. And in the middle of the night, I wake up. But I wake up not in my own body. I wake up, I'm actually in the closet of my room, and I'm sitting up on the shelf of my closet, which is not large enough for, really someone to sit on, but I was sitting there, and I knew my feet were dangling over the edge of this shelf in my closet. And as I'm sitting there, I see myself in bed, and I'm laying there, and I'm kind of moving around. You could tell I was uncomfortable. I wasn't feeling well. And then my dad walks in to the room, and he starts talking to me. He's checking on me. He feels my forehead, asks how I'm feeling. I'm telling him I'm still feeling sick. And then, like I said, he just kind of checked on me, and he left. And then the next thing I know, it's the morning time. And so I'm thinking, oh, this is just some sort of weird dream I had that my dad came in. So the next day I told him, and I said, hey, last night I had this dream that, you came into my room and you were like checking on me. And I told him what he said. And he said, well, that actually happened. That's what happened last night. I came in to check on you. But it was very strange because I was watching the whole thing from afar over my closet. So it kind of, things started there with like some weird stuff happening. And then I had 3 siblings who lived with me in this house as well. And I would say their experiences started a little bit before mine. And I won't go too much into detail about theirs because obviously they're the ones that experienced those things and I didn't. But some of the things that they would experience were they would see, and I would later see these, but they would start to see sort of these light orbs in their rooms. My brother, who was across the hall from me, his closet, which was actually, we shared a wall, and his closet was in that wall. He would see a couple of things. He would see these, what he thought were glowing red eyes coming out of the closet occasionally. And then he would see these orbs kind of accompanying it. My sister was down the hallway, and from where her room was, you could actually see out of her room into one of the bathrooms on that floor. And she had multiple experiences of looking out, because she would keep her door open sometimes at night, and looking out into the bathroom. And there were multiple nights when she saw a hand coming out of the sink in the bathroom.
Oh, boy.
So she said this hand would slowly rise up, and then it would just slowly go back down. And the thing that really freaked her out was there was no reflection of this hand in the mirror behind it. So that's kind of where things really started, was kind of them having some of these strange experiences. For me, things really kicked off after a couple of years being in that house. We refinished the basement in the house, and my brother and I, we moved into rooms down in the basement. And this is where things really kind of took off for me. And stop me if you have any questions or anything. I know I'm just kind of going. But,
no, it's perfect. You keep on going. It's great.
All right. So some of the first experiences I remember was I moved down into this room in the basement. And this room, it was odd the way that this room was designed, but when we moved in before we refinished it, because in the basement it had all that kind of old like wood paneling and everything. But my room, as you walked down the stairs of the basement, my room was directly in front of you. And in that room, there was just one window, because it's the basement. So there's one window that looks out into a window well. But the way that people had done it is they had actually, in that corner where that window is, they had built this little wall that blocked it off. So there was no window in this room, but there was just this tiny, and there was a door that went into where they had kind of cornered that off. So it wasn't big enough to be a storage, and it was just a weird kind of thing. And we all got weird vibes from that little area, when it was there. And then my dad tore it all down, redid the room, and I moved down there. But some of my first experiences down there were, I would have instances in the nighttime where there would be this kind of scratching outside my door. And I remember this happening a number of times, and I never really said anything to my family, because it's like, oh yeah, who's going to believe that, someone's scratching at your door? And that when you grow up with 3 siblings, you automatically assume anything happening to you is them just messing with you. So I didn't really think anything of it. But then I remember one day, my brother, who was in the room next to me, one day said, hey, I've been having some weird things happening. And I was like, well, what's going on? And he's like, well, something keeps scratching at my door at night. And I was like, well, that keeps happening to me too. And we're thinking well, is it the dog? But we grew up with a bulldog who, you could hear him anytime he went up and down the stairs. He was pretty winded anytime he went up or down it. So we would have heard him coming up and down the stairs if that was it. He was a little hefty guy. So we would have heard it. Not only that, but he really didn't come in the basement. He actually did not like the basement. He did not like going down there when we were growing up. So it kind of started there, just some strange stuff, some scratching on the door. And then I started having experiences with sleep paralysis, which I hadn't had before. When I was really young, like 4 or 5, I used to get night terrors for a couple of years where I would just wake up screaming. It's kind of funny. I always woke up apparently screaming that my sister was trying to kill me, was like what I was always screaming. So I had those, but that hadn't happened in a number of years. And like I said, after I moved into the space, I suddenly start having these like sleep paralysis, which I obviously know more about now. I didn't understand anything about it back then. But I would have a number of instances where in the middle of the night, I would just wake up and I couldn't move. And I would just have this overwhelming sense that somebody was in the room with me. Oftentimes that something was standing next to me. And this went on and off for a while where that kind of happened. I never saw anything at first. It was just that. And it was obviously, it's very scary when you're young and you wake up and you can't move. You don't know what's going on. But it started to get very strange because then I started having instances where I would be having this sleep paralysis. I would have this feeling that there was something in the room with me. And then I started seeing these shadows moving around my room. And often what they would do is they would stand, mostly for the most part, they would stand at the foot of my bed. And sometimes they would actually crouch at the foot of my bed, almost like they were kind of trying to hide behind it, but that wasn't going to happen. So these figures would stand, like I said, at the foot of my bed. And oftentimes they would also come around the edge of my bed and sit kind of at the foot of my bed. And I knew that they were sitting on my bed because I could feel the bed move down when they would sit there. So you could feel kind of like the pressure. Now, it wasn't as obvious, I feel like, of a movement of the mattress as if like a full grown person was just to flop down on the bed and sit down, but I could feel it sink slightly, just kind of go in. And this was, obviously pretty scary to kind of have going on, but I didn't really mention a lot to my family. I grew up in a family that wasn't like overly religious, but my parents were both pretty religious. And, to be honest, any mention of things like that was always like, oh, well, maybe it's like a demon, or like you just need to, say Jesus's name and it'll go away, which I tried multiple times when I was a kid. I would say things, say like, oh, in the name of Jesus, you can't be here. To be honest, never seemed to make a difference to them. They never really seemed to really care about that. So it really started to, just kind of escalate as the years went on. This went on for years of these instances happening where they would just be there standing at the foot of my bed, coming around the corner. Sometimes they would be in that corner by the window where that kind of weird closet thing used to be. And they would just be standing there, and they were just dark. Like, they were just these dark figures, but a little like kind of grainy looking as well. They kind of had this like grainy quality to them, which is why the only way I was able to determine and like, distinguish them from just the darkness in the room was just this, I don't really know how to describe it. It was just, you could tell that there was something there. And it wasn't, I couldn't see like a nose. I couldn't see eyes. I never even recall seeing like digits on their hands or anything like that, but I could see that they clearly had a head, and they had a body, and they had arms, and they had legs, but I could never really make anything out. Now these ones, they weren't super tall. If I had to guess based off of kind of thinking back about it, I would say they were probably like 4.5 to 5 feet tall. So they weren't really that tall. So it wasn't like the size of like, your standard normal person. So like I said, this went on for like a couple of years, and it got to the point though where when it first started, it was always when I had this like sleep paralysis going on, and then I would, I'd see them, and it was always when I couldn't move. But as the years went on, I don't know if I just got used to it and I was able to snap myself out of it, but there were times that I would wake up and I would just know like one of them is in here right now, and I was not in sleep paralysis. I could move, I could do whatever I wanted, I could speak, but I oftentimes was still so scared that I just wouldn't say anything or wouldn't get up and leave the room. It's a 7-foot walk to the door, but it felt like a mile when you have something like that sitting in the room with you. So yeah, like I said, just dealt with this for like a number of years with them. They would stand in the corner, and then it kind of escalated from there, because after a point they started doing, when I was younger, I would always I barely had the covers on me when I would sleep. And when it would be at the foot of my bed, sometimes it would crouch down and I could feel it pressing against the bottom of my feet, just slightly, just kind of a little press every once in a while. And then sometimes it would start poking at it. Like it felt like a finger poking the bottom of my feet, just like over and over. Not like very hard, just like kind of slowly and just poking it. And that just terrified me. So that moment after that happened, I started always having the covers tucked in under my feet. And to this day, I cannot sleep without covers under my feet. Like I cannot do it. I will not let my feet hang out of the bed.
So those,
and I'm 35 now. So.
Those memes, all those memes that you see then about covered feet being very important, you're going, no, that is a real thing. That's not just a funny meme. That is real to me. Cover those feet up.
Oh yeah. Absolutely. I like I said, still to this day, I remember my partner and I, when we first started dating, she always made these comments like, you're always tucking your feet under. And I was like, that will always be the case. And I told her, I told her why. And I was like, this something used to poke my feet. And then, I just don't really ever want that to happen again. So yeah, those memes are definitely true. They ring true. So it started, again, so it escalated to that point. And the thing was, when these things were in my room, I never felt like an overly like malicious presence, but the energy in the room when they would be there, it was uncomfortable. It wasn't, I never, even though I was scared, I never felt like, oh, these things are going to try to hurt me. They're going to try and kill me. But it was just so uncomfortable. It didn't feel, like I said, malicious, but it certainly didn't feel good. Certainly didn't feel like a fun energy. So this escalated, and then I put in my email, there were two things, and these are kind of the two main things that I dealt with them, but I actually ended up having two separate occasions where things got a little more real and a little bit more physical. And the first instance happened one night. I wake up and, I'm laying there, and it started with, I was in sleep paralysis, and I was like, okay, here we go again. Like I can feel something's in here. But the energy felt so off in the room that night. That night, it did feel just a little bit more, I don't know, I guess dangerous might be the word, or, not, like I said, not fully malicious, but just more dangerous. And so I kind of snapped myself out of the sleep paralysis. And I know I was, because I could move my limbs and stuff. But I look over, and there's one of them standing in that corner again. But and I don't know how I know this, because again, I never saw any facial features or anything, but I could tell it was facing away from me. And I think it was facing towards that window. And it didn't seem like it was overly paying a ton of attention to me like they normally did, because it normally felt like they were just fixated on me, and oftentimes, like I said, they would stand next to me and they would just kind of stand over me and kind of like felt like look at me. But this time it was facing away. It was looking towards that window. And I just got this like overwhelming sense of like, something is really wrong. Like something's really off tonight. So I'm laying there and just kind of, dealing with it and closing my eyes a lot and just trying to force myself to go back to sleep, when I suddenly feel the presence is like right next to me, just on my left-hand side, right next to the edge of the bed. And it just, again, it felt so overwhelming that time. It was just right there. And I was just like, oh, something's really wrong tonight. And then this thing starts to walk back, and it moves across the room, does an L-shaped pattern around my bed, goes back to where the window is, does it again. And it starts pacing, and it's almost pacing around the room in just the same pattern, which was really unusual. I would never had these things do that. They were usually fairly stationary for the most part. They would move a little bit, but they weren't really walking around much. And this thing is just pacing and pacing. And it just built the anxiety in me up so much that I freaked out. And I grabbed my comforter, I throw it over my head, and I just run for the door. And I'm like, I'm leaving. And I run for the door, and I don't know what happened next. Just terrified the living hell out of me. And I don't know if it intentionally did this or if we just happened to sort of run into each other. But me and this thing, we run into each other. And all we have between us is the comforter. And we hit, and I fall right over. And this thing falls right on top of me. And all that is between us is my comforter. And I'm freaking out, just trying to push this thing away from me and try and get myself off the ground at the same time. And again, I don't know if this thing was trying to keep me down or if it was just as startled as I was and it was trying to get off of me. But we had a little mini struggle. We're both trying to get out of this situation. And I'm just freaking out. And I'm like, to the point where I can't even scream. I can't do anything. And I just keep struggling with it. And then finally, I just got so scared that I just tucked in under the covers, or under my comforter that I had it over me. I tucked in, I curled into a ball, and I just laid there and was just waiting. And then it stopped, and the thing was just gone. And so I'm laying there. I honestly have no idea how long I laid there for, but once I finally got the courage to kind of move, I pulled the comforter off of me, and the light in my room is on. Like, it had been turned on, and the light had been off that entire time because I was sleeping, obviously, so the light was off. That was the first time that this really just kind of like escalated so far that it just like terrified me beyond belief. So that was kind of the first time that it really just kind of went off the rails.
You don't hear about that very often. I can feel the weight of it sitting on my bed, or occasionally you'll hear them like the pokes on your foot, but to have it full on top of you with just that comforter in between, and you can feel the whole weight of it, right? I mean, as if a 4 or 5 foot tall person was on top of you. Was that the weight of the thing?
Yeah, that's exactly what it felt like. But the weird thing again was, it's like I didn't feel any hands or anything. You would think you would feel, you'd probably feel a person if they were on top of you, their hands pushing against you. I mostly just felt pressure. I couldn't tell what was like an appendage or what was like a part, just the main part of its, quote unquote body, I guess, or whatever. But it was definitely, you could feel the pressure on top of me.
I think, Patrick, this is the first time I've heard of a shadow person falling on top of somebody like this. Like it was an accidental thing, and you guys crashing into each other. Wow. I don't think I've heard anything quite like this.
Yeah, it was really something. It's something that I'll never forget. It's a memory that I honestly, personally, I don't have the best memory. Like I said, I struggle with timelines and things like that, but that is just something that when I think about it, it's like I can just go right back to being there that night. And after that, it honestly felt like things quieted down after that happened. They weren't coming around as much, and I wasn't seeing as many things. I wasn't hearing scratching on the door for a while. I do remember that it just felt like a period of calm for a while after that.
I think you stunned him too, and he told his friends, like, listen, this kid's gonna get up and run around crazy. You better calm down for a little while.
You could touch these things, like, they're right there. So yeah, I like I said, I wasn't sure. It almost seems like maybe because it was pacing that I just happened to get up and run right when it was coming around the corner of the bed. Because again, it didn't feel like I've been tackled before in my life. I played football when I was a kid and stuff, so I know what it's like to be tackled, and it didn't exactly feel like that. It didn't feel like it jumped me and was trying to do something. But yeah, like I said, it calmed down for a bit after that. But again, it eventually did kind of like pick up. But I would see also occasionally these light orbs in the corner of my room. Sometimes they were this like bluish color, I would say maybe the size of a golf ball, if I had to guess, thinking back, not very large, but just these little glowing orbs, similar to kind of what my siblings had seen. And sometimes it was blue. And then I also had like this yellowish orange one that I would see. I really wish I almost wish this stuff had happened to me, now when I was older, because now that I've, kind of really looked into more of this stuff, and, I've listened to your show a lot and learned a lot about other people's experiences, I probably would have paid attention to things like, oh, were the orbs happening on the nights that the shadow people were there? But I just have no idea. I don't really remember if there was any correlation. But sometimes I would see these light orbs as well, just like my siblings did. I never saw the hands coming out of the sink or anything like that, or out of the closet or anything like that. But there was one other time that there was an escalation with what I think were maybe the shadow people at that time. And that was, I was a little bit older at that point. I was probably 15 or 16 at that point, and things weren't happening as much, but they were still going on. And, it's funny. It's like after years of that going on, it sounds weird, but it just kind of became normal. It was like, you just kind of got used to it. And, after all those years, I was like, well, they've never really tried to hurt me. So it's like, they've had plenty of chances. So while it's still scary and, creeps you out, I guess I stopped paying attention to it as much because it would happen, and it got to the point where it's like, oh, I'm just gonna go back to sleep because it's like, why stay up for this? But there was one night I remember I woke up and I was not in sleep paralysis. I just woke up and I was really nervous and just had like a really bad feeling again. And I was just thinking, oh man, not again, another bad feeling going on here. And this happened fairly quickly though. I could tell there was one of them there at the foot of my bed. And when I woke up, but then next thing I know, I was like, that's so weird. It's gone. It's just like, it feels like it's gone. It's just not here anymore. I can't feel the presence. I don't see anything. And I was like, that's really strange. And then, cause they never had really just like been there when I woke up and then just like vanished like that. And suddenly I just hear this pop, this crack, and my closet door is suddenly on top of me. And I freaked out. It was on top of me in bed. It had just been pushed down on top of me. And because my bed was actually fairly close to the closet, it's kind of one of those kind of accordion style doors where you can like pull it out along a track and then push it back. I hear these pops. It's on top of me. I freak out. I jump right out of bed, run right upstairs. I go all the way upstairs where my brother, who was at that point, he was the only one still living there with us. And I'm like, dude, I don't know what's going on. My closet door just like fell on top of me. And he's like, oh, it probably just like fell off the hinges, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, how would my door just fall off the hinges? Like in the middle of the night. And he's like, all right, I'll go down with you. And so he comes downstairs with me and we look at it and he goes, holy hell. The hinges are completely broken off of this door. Like the hinges at the bottom and the top were completely snapped off and completely broken.
So even if that's, here's another one I hadn't heard of before. When you're like, no, the door was on top of me. So say somebody does break the door off the hinges and then they just barely set it out of the track that it's supposed to be in and then tipped it over. Could it have reached you? But here's where my brain is. Cause if it tips over, just plain devil's advocate, if it tips over, part of it's still going to be on the floor, right? Or was the entire thing up off of the floor and on top of you on the bed?
No, so it was not, the bottom of it was not on the floor, but I would say the door was about like, it hit me about midway through the door.
Okay.
So it was still completely elevated, but if it had just fallen, let's say it came off the hinges, I would say it would kind of hit my bed and then kind of lean over me, right? So it wouldn't have like really fallen on top of me if it had just fallen over. This was almost as if somebody had broken it, moved it forward, 3 feet, and then pushed it over on top of me.
Right. Yeah, that's kind of where I was going with it. I'm going, how exactly could we explain this? That's a tough one.
Yeah, and that's what me and my brother were trying to do, and I can't recall if we told my parents right away about that or not, but anytime we kind of brought it up to my parents, and they, it was always kind of like, oh, sure, like the kids are just seeing things, or that's not real. And so I can't remember if we ever explained that to them, but I can tell you this, that closet door was never reattached and they still live there. And that closet is still doorless to this day.
Your parents are still there?
Yeah, they still live there. They, and it's funny because my brother and I mean, he's 38 now, I'm 35. We still won't sleep there. So we went to go visit actually this last holiday, over New Year's, and we stayed at an Airbnb. I stayed with him and his family at an Airbnb because both of us are just like, we can't sleep in that basement. I just can't do it. I've tried. I've actually done it a couple times in my adult life. And, I've gone there and been like, oh, I'm an adult now. It's fine. I can handle this. I'm not scared. And then halfway through the night, I end up going and sleeping on the couch.
Yeah. Your mind just goes right back. I don't think that it's easy to forget things like that, especially with you, with all this physical interactions with the actual beings, and then with things that they can seemingly manipulate. So your parents, though, you said that they are quite religious, and if you bring anything up like this, it kind of goes right to the D word, right? So have they ever, though, spoken to you, since they have lived there for so long, that they've ever had any experiences there at all?
Not to the extent that we like me and my siblings did, and because we talk about it all the time. Because like now, as adults, obviously we have no problem talking to them about it. I can't remember when we really started bringing this stuff up to them, but they've told us, like, well, you know what, you all had these weird experiences, but we've never had any of these extreme experiences. My dad did have a number of times when our family dog growing up, he would the bulldog, he would suddenly, he'd be sitting there watching TV or something, and he would just stop and he'd like stare at parts of the house, particularly this one hallway on the main floor. And he would just start growling, and he would just get in his little stance like something was standing there. But that's about the extent that they had. So no, they never really had any of these living there. Because I've told them 1,000 times, like, you should sell this place and move somewhere else. And they're like, oh, well, no, we've never really had anything really like that happen to us.
Do they know why you guys stayed at an Airbnb?
Oh, yes. Yeah. I tell them, we've told them that we just can't sleep there. My brother, actually, his son, he will not even put him down for a nap in any of the rooms in that house.
Wow.
While we were visiting, he would drive over to the Airbnb to put his son down for a nap, because he said he just did not feel comfortable leaving his son alone in any of the rooms in the house.
And the bulldog, that little bulldog, he knew. He's like, I'm not going to the basement. I have enough going on in the rest of the house to watch out for, right? And so the basement seemed like a pretty dark space. And I wonder about that weird little area before you guys remodeled, if that was served a purpose, or like, why would that even be built like that?
Yeah, again, since my parents talked to people around the neighborhood, especially like the next door neighbors, we just got the impression that, unfortunately the folks before us that were running the foster home were almost just kind of getting foster children to just get the governmental money, and that they just did not treat these children very well. We often wondered if it was almost like a punishment area, like where you would be put as punishment, and kept in there. And so it just had a bad energy, specifically that room, because my father went to seminary, and he would study in there. And he, I guess, to that effect from your question earlier, I guess now that I'm thinking about it, he did have some instances, because when that was his old office before he remodeled, and he did say multiple times that he would just get this overwhelming feeling that somebody was like standing behind him. So he flipped his office around so that he faced the door. Wow. Yeah. So and he said it was mainly though while he was studying for seminary that he had those. But I guess after that he didn't really spend much time down there because it became my room. So, but he did have those, but he never saw anything though. At least that he's told me.
So interesting that when he's studying the gospel at any time is when he would mostly feel it, huh?
Yeah, right. Yeah, and he did say that after I was the last one to move out, then after I moved out, he went down and did sort of I guess you could call them a mini exorcism. He read some passages from the Bible down there, and he was like, yeah, no, everything's good now because, we did that. And I was like, but my parents also, they don't really spend any time in that basement. They don't really have much reason to go down there anymore. They've turned one of the rooms into a workout room. So my mom works out down there, once a day or something like that. But other than that, they don't really spend a lot of time down there. And most of it did seem to happen in the basement, even though some of those like hands and orbs and eyes and stuff did happen upstairs.
Well, and you guys being the ages that you were, and if we are assuming that a lot of the activity is centered around the fact that there was possibly some abuse going on before you guys moved in with that other family, I would imagine that was kind of a double target painted on you guys' backs as far as, you're the kids of the house. So it may be attracted to you guys. Yeah.
That would make sense to me, and I don't know also, just in my opinion, I think sometimes people who tend to be more religious don't pick up on things as much as those of us that aren't. And I think that's just maybe because, they think about it more black and white, angels and demons,
right.
And things like that, where, someone like myself, I don't see it like that. I think there's gray areas in between good and evil.
Yeah, it sounds like you guys had the mini Skinwalker Ranch going on there. Everything except for creatures, Of course, what were the red glowing eyes? I don't know. It could have been a creature. I mean, there was all kinds of stuff going on there.
I know. We should sell tickets.
Seriously. I mean, especially when you're like, well, they still own the house. I'm like, okay, coming out there.
So. Yeah, and it's funny. I guess if my parents listen to this, they'll know this now. But my siblings and I have like a little joke, like, "Well, no, you can take the house when they're gone. No, you take the house when they're gone. I don't want the house. Like, you can have it. Like, I'm not taking it."
Oh man! Like, well, who? Like, spin the wheel. Who's getting it? Who's getting it?
Yeah, exactly. There was one other kind of main weird thing that happened to me that pertains to still living there. And that was, I put in my email that I put Hat Man just because I don't really know how else to describe it. It was a very strange experience for me. But in our basement, after they renovated it, they got a pool table, and, we were really big into playing pool all the time. And there was one evening where I was down there just playing by myself, and with the way the basement was shaped, you would kind of come around the corner, and then there was this rec room where the pool table was. And I'm down there and I'm shooting pool by myself, and I lean in to take a shot. And, out of my peripheral vision, I see somebody walking towards me, and I'm thinking it's my brother. And so I take my shot. I turn to say something to him, and it's not my brother. It's this dark figure, which looked like it was in a trench coat with a hat, sort of like not like a large, like, cowboy hat or anything like that, a little bit smaller, but a brim that stuck out. And as I turned to say something to what I thought was my brother, it's only 3 or 4 feet away from me, and it rears up and looks as if it's going to punch me in the face. And so I freak out and I fall backwards. And when I fall backwards, I turn, and when I fall backwards, my back is now facing where it was. And when I turn around, nothing there.
And did you tell anybody about this?
Not till later, I don't think. I don't recall, because this was later. I was probably like 16 or 17 at this point when this happened. And at that point, my brother was still there, but he was pretty close to moving out. And I don't think I ever told them about it until later on.
I guess at that point, like you said, as scary as some of these can be, it's just like, well, there's another experience to add to the plethora that you had going on there.
Yeah, and it's funny. It's when I thought about reaching out to you for a while. I was like, oh, maybe I should tell her about some of my weird experiences growing up. And it was actually, I started thinking that after I had listened to one of them. I can't remember which one it was, but there was somebody who was dealing with a similar thing of like a shadow figure standing in their doorway. And I remember when I listened to that, it was I think it was one of the first episodes I listened to, because I went home and was so excited to my partner. And I was just like other people have had the exact same experience that I have had, because I had never met anybody before who had, had something similar like that happen. So when I was thinking about reaching out to you, I was like, oh, well, yeah, but I only have a couple things. But then once I sat down and started writing things down, I was like, oh man, I've had a lot of really weird things happen.
Yeah, I think it's funny how your brain will parcel things out just so that it can deal with it. Because then, like you said, once you sit down and you start to list these things, I think that's happened to a lot of folks. They're like, well, yeah, I probably have a couple interesting things. I don't think it would even fill a show. I get a lot of emails like that. And then you'd be surprised. Like, once we start talking, there is a lot more that people can dredge up out of their memory banks. And then it's like, I'm kind of going, believe me, and that's not my main concern, is how long a show is. I just find it fascinating when folks are kind of going, well, I thought I had a couple of weird things, and then, oh my goodness, and it's like a tidal wave of stuff going down, right? So, but what a jerk that shadow person, Hat Man, whatever he is, he thought he was going to punch you. Like, what in the world?
Yeah, and it was just such a brief interaction, because, like I said, it looked like, out of the corner of my eye, oh, my brother's just walking up to me, and then to see that, it was just, and that's honestly, it's the last thing that kind of sticks out in my mind of living at their house. It's kind of like the really large, strange things. I know up until the day I left, there were still, once I got to be later in my teen years, the shadow figure visits kind of diminished. They didn't totally go away, but they just didn't happen very often. They felt more brief. And I don't know if that's just you get older and you stop caring less about it or what, or you just start, I think part of it is you just start rationalizing more, and you almost start I kind of started telling myself, nah, I don't know, man, maybe those things never really happened.
Right.
Maybe that just didn't really happen. Maybe this is all, it was all just a dream. But I'm one of these people where I'm very aware of when I'm in a dream and when I'm not in a dream, because in my dreams, I don't really have scary dreams, which is, I guess I'm lucky because I'm very rational in life in general. But even in my dreams, if something's happening, I can say, oh, this isn't really happening. I remember I was once having a bad dream about the T-Rex from Jurassic Park chasing me through a mall. And I remember just stopping and going like, Patrick, this isn't real. And then I just woke up and was done with it. So I'm very good at being able to tell when I'm in a dream and when I'm not. And I know when those things were going on that I was not dreaming. I know that I was awake.
Those damn T-Rexes, they just love to chase you, don't they? I mean, who really wants to stand still? The vision is based on movement, but who the hell wants to stand still?
Yeah, good advice. There's a giant T-Rex. We'll just go ahead and stand still. No, I'm running.
Yeah, trust the science, okay? Trust the scientists that have never actually stood next to a T-Rex to test this theory, okay?
Exactly.
Very nerve-wracking. I don't know. Well, what do you say are you ready to switch gears here? A little bit of Bigfoot?
Yeah, no, definitely. That is, and it's funny. It's like even from like when I was a little kid, I was always like kind of into Bigfoot, but then I had all these other experiences. And I've never been really into like, into ghosts or, demons and stuff like that. But, Bigfoot's always been an interest of mine. Yeah. So first I've had kind of 3 separate instances where I feel like there was Sasquatch activity. Of course, I say think because I can't really prove it, and some of these instances in my mind, I'm still trying to process, especially the last one I'll tell you about. But the first one that kind of happened over two different hikes. It was in 2014. It was the summer of 2014, and my partner and I, me and her had just started dating, and we decided to go hiking near Bailey, Colorado. This is we were still living in Colorado at this time. And so I can't remember the name of the hike that we did, but we go up there and there's, first off, there's like this Bigfoot outpost there. This gentleman runs like this Bigfoot outpost in Bailey. And so we'd always wanted to kind of like go see that. So we stopped there and we like chatted with him. And I guess he, at that time, that was years ago, obviously, he said he'd never seen one. But the weird thing was when we visited that day, there was this elderly woman that was sitting there in there with him, just in this chair. And she was wearing what looked like a judge's robe. And as we're talking to him, he's like, no, I've never seen one. And she just goes, well, I've seen them a lot. And we were like, really? You've seen them before? And she goes, oh, yeah. She's like, you got to be real careful when they're younger around. They get real testy and they'll throw things at you if you get too close. And that was before I'd ever had any experiences. So, of course, we leave and we're just laughing about it, right? We're like, oh, yeah, crazy old lady thinks she's seen a Bigfoot. But so we decided to do this hike. And the first time we went up on this hike, it was, I think, round trip. It was probably close to about like somewhere like 13 to 15 miles round trip on this hike. And we started out, and not like 5 minutes after we started, we start hearing from the side that kind of leads, more dense into the forest. We just start hearing these knocks, just this clunk, clunk, clunk. And then it would be silent for a little while as we're walking along. And then we'd hear it again, just clunk, clunk, clunk. And we were like, that's like really weird. We're like, there's nobody out here. And there was nobody at the trailhead when we got there. So we were like the first people to go out on the trail that day. And we're like, oh, well, maybe there's like hikers or something like that. So we're hiking along, and this just continues almost the whole way. Just intervals of just this like knocking coming from the same direction, but not necessarily in the same spot, I guess. You could kind of tell that it almost kind of moved along as we moved along. So we're hiking along, and we finally get to a point where there's this little creek, and we're like, all right, well, let's just set up our hammock, and we're just going to like hang out for a bit. And at that time, I'd seen a little bit about, Sasquatch stuff. And I was like, maybe these are wood knocks. I'm going to knock back and see if we get anything. So I found a big stick, like almost like a log. And I did the same thing. I just clunk, clunk, clunk against a tree, and it would come back, clunk, clunk, clunk. And then when I would do it, it would match kind of my pattern. So for example, a couple times I would do it and I would go a little slower, like clunk, 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 and then same thing would come back. And then I would go like clunk, 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 and then I would get like the same thing back. And so we did that for about, I'd say like 20 minutes. I did the wood knocks, and then finally, like after my last wood knock, just nothing, just dead silence. We didn't get anything else for the rest of that trip. We were just like, okay, all right. So we hiked back down. Nothing weird happened on the way down. But then we returned a few weeks later because we wanted to do that trail again, because we wanted to go farther than we had gone on that trail, because we only went up a certain ways and then turned back around. And we're like, all right, we're going to go up. And I was super excited because I'm like, all right, well, let's do some more wood knocks. We're going to get something. We're hiking. I'm trying wood knocks. We're not getting a thing. And I'm just like, great, we missed our chance. We're not hearing anything. So we do this hike, and then on the way back down, you get to a point where the path like really narrowed and was kind of on the side of this hill. And when we had come up, the path was completely clear, nothing on it. As we're going down the path, I'm looking down and I go, a tree must have fallen in the path after us. I was like, there's a tree sitting in the pathway. And so we get closer to it. And I'm looking at it. It's probably, if I can remember correctly, probably like 7 foot tall, like pine tree. And I'm looking at it and I'm like, something's really weird about this tree. And as we walk up the tree, you could see where it had been like snapped at the bottom, at the base of it. And so you could tell it was completely fresh. It was a new tree. It's not like it had been broken and then like pushed out a while ago and had been pushed over there. But the weirdest thing about this tree was in the center of the tree, the wood is twisted, almost like corkscrew style. And the tree had just been twisted, like about a foot, I would say, of this tree was just turned in like a way, but it wasn't broken. I've just never seen anything like it. I was like, why? I mean, who can twist a tree like this? And we're like, oh, maybe park rangers came through here. But then we're like, why would they put it over the trail? And also, how would they twist this tree and then block the trail with it? So we looked around. I'm like, well, this thing had to have fallen. Like, it had to have fallen from somewhere. But like I said, on that part of it, you're on the side of a hill. So if it were to fall, it would have had to fall from the side that's higher than us, because the other way it would have just fallen down the hill the other way. And we spent maybe 20, 30 minutes just like searching the ground, like, where did this thing come from? And we could not find anywhere around there that this tree was. So we kind of wondered if that was a little bit, maybe they recognized us from the time before and were giving us a little like, don't really come back up here kind of thing.
How big around do you think that tree was, if you could guess?
Oh man, diameter on it, I would say maybe like 5-6 inches, I would guess. Yeah. It wasn't a very old tree, it was a younger tree still, but I can tell you that there's no chance I could have bent a tree like that.
Right. Yeah, I would say that was a nice sign to ixnay out of the area.
Yeah, I mean, I think maybe they were a little annoyed with my knocking before. So they, they told us, just get out of here. Don't come back. Like, don't come back up this path.
You're like, oh, the crazy lady's not so crazy after all.
Yeah, that's...
But,
that's kind of when we started to think of that.
Yeah, you mentioned the Sasquatch Outpost, and for, it'll come out next month, but On the Trail UFOs Night Visitors, we filmed all of it in and around the, Denver area, San Luis Valley of Colorado. And of course, even though we're there for UFOs, that we all love Bigfoot stuff. That's my favorite thing. So we absolutely had to drive up the mountain, impressive area, by the way, of course, and go to Bailey, Colorado, and the Sasquatch Outpost. Great place if anybody has time to get around up there. So you say this hiking trail wasn't actually too far from the Sasquatch Outpost then?
No, if I recall correctly, and I'll have to ask my partner. She's not here right now, but she keeps track of like everywhere we've ever hiked ever. I can be like, oh, remember that one time? And she's like, oh yeah, this trail. Remember on that date? And I'm like, I don't know how you do that, but okay. She would know, but I would say 20 minutes maybe from there is where the trailhead was to head off on this one.
I'm assuming that when you guys went back there, even though this was years ago, he at this time has that whole museum in the back with all of the sightings on it, and there's different levels of the sightings, kind of like the BFRO would do. Is you guys' log in the trail and knocking on the wall at the Sasquatch Outpost?
No, so he did have that, and I love that map that's got the little pins in it that kind of shows where people had like the encounters. No, we thought about it, but I think back then, I think back then when we were open-minded to it, I think we were just still in that phase of like, whatever, like who knows if this is even real or what it is. So we were like, no, because I know we had talked about like, we should go back there and like tell him and then like put that up there. And then we just never did it. I honestly don't think we've been back to Bailey, Colorado since then.
Yeah, that's a cool area. I know it'd probably get pretty cold in the winter, but the Bigfoot have plenty of fur, so I think they're okay up there. Beautiful, beautiful place. But yeah, that's a heck of a climb, from Denver up into Bailey. I mean, the elevation change is pretty steep there, so impressive, beautiful place.
Oh, yeah. Oh, it's such an amazing place. We loved our time in Colorado because it's just, the Rockies are just, I mean, it's just amazing to go hike up there.
Absolutely. Well, yeah, where are we going next?
Let's see. So the next one is pretty brief, but and this one, and I put in my email, I think I told you that we were up there, and then as I'm talking to my partner about this, she goes, "I wasn't with you when this happened," and I was like, I thought you were there with me," and she's like, "I don't know." She's like, "I remember the other one with the tree." She's like, "But I don't remember this one." So I think this is actually when I was alone on this one, and I a few years ago I did a job where we live in Oregon now, and at that time we lived in Bend, Oregon. And I worked for a company that I had to just travel all day for. So I would drive through the Cascades, twice a day. I would, go over the mountain pass in the morning, come back overnight. So when I was doing that, it was just so great because I could stop and do little like mini hikes while I was, in the middle of my work day. And I did a lot of that, just going down a lot of Forest Service roads and spending some time out there. And for the most part, never really had anything happen. But one time I was on, I don't know if you heard, they call it like the Oregon Bigfoot Highway. It goes between Detroit and Estacada in the Cascades. And I was along there, and I remember I had some time to kill. So I stopped along a Forest Service road. I was just kind of, like I said, I would just kind of drive up them and hang out and just kind of see and explore the land and stuff. So I'm driving up it, and finally I just decided to pull over because I wanted to get out of the car and stretch and just hang out for a little bit. So I pull over where there's just like a mini little pull out and stop the car, and I get out. And as soon as I get out of the car, I'm just like, there is just a terrible smell. I'm like, there must be a dead deer or something around here. It just smelled awful. So I just get out of the car, and I walked a little ways into the forest, just so where there was like a little spot that you could get into. I didn't go very far. I'd say maybe like I walked in like, 15, 20 feet. And I like to, like when I'm out there, I like to just stop and I just like to listen, just kind of be out there and kind of, soak up the forest. So I'm just like standing there, and then suddenly I just hear something hit this bush that's like right next to me. Not right next to me. I'd say maybe like 6 feet next to me or away from me. And I'm like, well, that's weird. I was like, I don't see like a chipmunk or anything because it like shook just a tiny bit. And I was like, that's weird. And then suddenly I hear a rock. There's a log that's kind of in front of me. And I hear this rock hit this log. And I'm just like, where is this coming from? I'm like, what is going on here? And I'm looking around and I can't see anything. Like I'm looking into the forest and I'm just like, I don't see anything or anybody. And I didn't see anybody coming up. And, I would, if somebody were, in their car up here, I would definitely like hear them coming down the road or something. And so I stand there and probably like, I don't know, like a minute or two went by and suddenly another one hits the bush. And I'm just going, something's being thrown at me. I can't figure out what's going on. And this went on for a couple of minutes where it wasn't like consistently being thrown at me, but just every once in a while one would, but nothing ever hit me. Nothing ever actually hit me, but it was always aimed at that log or at the bush next to me. And finally, after the last one that hit the log went off, I just kind of got really creeped out. And I was just like, all right, well, I'm going to get out of here because something's telling me that they don't want me here. So then I left, and that's kind of that one. So that one's pretty brief, but it was kind of a strange experience.
And this, so it was a Forest Service road that you pulled off of, but this is essentially kind of in the middle of nowhere. I mean, there's not a lot around that area.
No, because when you go up that highway, there's just not much. I mean, there's plenty of campgrounds and things like that, but there's only after Detroit, on the way up to Estacada, there's not much. There's maybe like one small town, I think, but I wasn't near any of those. And I pulled off, really going into Mount Hood National Forest towards, I believe it's a Lolly Lake that's over there. So I kind of went that direction, and no, it was just like, nobody out there. I mean, like I said, I didn't see a single car go up, and I didn't see anybody pass me. I didn't see anybody the whole time I was up there. So, and it was also, again, this is like middle of the day, middle of the week. So it's not like prime time for people to be like hiking or anything like that.
And was it your intention though were you wanting to go further into the woods for a walk? Like that was your intention, so the rocks actually did stop you from going in?
To be honest, I wasn't really looking to go like do a hike at that time or anything, because where I was, I would have had to have been like bushwhacking to do that.
Okay.
There was no real trail or anything. So it's like, I just kind of walked in about 15 or 20 feet into the woods, as I would often do when I worked that job. I would just kind of stop places and kind of go hang out in the woods, because I always enjoy just sitting out there and kind of being a part of it.
I think that's a great idea to increase chances of some kind of a Bigfoot encounter. Just pull off random places. You don't even have to go on a big old hike or camp somewhere. Just go far enough in where they go, that's far enough there, bub. We're going to let you know what's going on in our area.
Yeah, that's kind of how I feel. I think, people who may be looking for experiences or something. I mean, one of the things that, I have a lot of friends who are just like, oh, yeah, well, I hike all the time and I've never had an experience. And I'm like, well, I'm thinking that Sasquatch probably doesn't use your, really well-traveled human trails, that often to, to travel. So kind of going up those Forest Service roads and just spending some time out where there's not a lot of people, I think that's like your best bet.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, it's I used to do when I worked that job, I would do that a lot, and I would even in the nighttime, and I'm not suggesting anybody do this because this is not a good idea, and my partner honestly isn't fully aware that I used to do this very often. So when she hears this, she'll probably have a word with me. But I would, when I was doing that job, I would be out there, late at night. Sometimes I wouldn't even get back till 1 a.m. And what I would do is sometimes just kind of stop at some of these like snow parks or things that are, during the summer that people aren't really using in the evenings, and I would just go just a little ways out there, not very far. I wouldn't go, like 2 miles in. I would just, hike in a small bit and just kind of like hang out there in the night and just kind of listen to what was going on. And that was just, I always loved doing that. But I stopped doing that after my final experience that happened at Mount Rainier. After that, I have not been able to bring myself to go even 10 feet into the woods in the evening time. So I don't know if you want to hear about that one now. Or...
Oh, yes. Yes, I do.
Okay. So this one's a little harder to talk about because it really just, it just left such an impression on me. And I think I put in my email to you. It's like, I can't even process, or it's going to be very hard for me to explain kind of what happened. But this happened in June of 2021, and my daughter and my partner and I, and my daughter's 15, we decided to go up near Mount Rainier National Park and do some camping. We were just going to do some camping and do a little bit of hiking and stuff like that. So, and this occurred not far from the town of Packwood. So that's kind of the area that we're looking at. So more like southeastern part of Mount Rainier National Park. So we get up there. We go up there on a Sunday, and we're driving up there, and we get to the campground. And we had actually been to this campground before, and this time we decided we're just doing like your standard campground, where you drive up and you camp. We love the backpack, and we've taken our daughter a few times on like some backpacking trips and stuff, but we were like, no, we're just going to do like your standard campground and kind of do it that way. So it's really easy. So we went to this campground, and like I said, we had been there. I believe it was actually the year before that my partner and I went there. And there was this one spot that we had that was just awesome, that we really, really wanted to be at again. But unfortunately, it was already, we thought it was booked up at the time, but it turns out that area of the campground just had not opened for the year, because this was mid-June, maybe mid to late June of 2021. So up there, things are just starting to gear up as far as like the campground's opening and all of that. So we get up there and on that Sunday, and we got up there in like the afternoon time. So we set up camp and everything. And then we get to our campsite, we set up, and then kind of we start walking around the campground, and like 2 campsites down from us, there is just like a group of frat boys, like 10 to 15 of them, all just there to party. You can tell they're there to just get crazy. And we're like, oh, great, this is going to get real loud up here. This is going to be a lot of fun. So we're like, whatever, we'll just deal with it. But we go walking then, and it's, you know, it's your traditional kind of like, you know, national park campground where they have different loops, you know, like loop A, loop B, loop C for camping. And loop C was the farthest kind of like, you know, towards, you know, into the forest, and was down at the very southern end of the campground and stuff like that. And that's where that one spot that we had been at before was. So we were like, oh, well, let's just go walk around the campground and, you know, check everything out. And as we get down there, we're like, wait, this section's closed. Like, nobody's down here. This whole loop down here is completely empty. And I was like, well, I'm going to go talk to the campground host, just explain our situation, that we don't really want to be right next to, you know, the frat boys having a fun time, and see if they'll just let us stay at one of these, even though they're not open yet. So we go explain it to them, and they're like, oh, that's fine. Like, you can go ahead and just pick whichever one you want down there. There's nobody else down there. And we're like, great. So we go down there, and we find that exact spot that we had been at before. And this spot is great because it's nestled into this spot where you're just surrounded by forest on 3 sides. And then to your kind of on your left-hand side, there's, you know, up this little mini hill, there's another camp spot right there, but still a pretty good distance from you. And then right across from it, there's a trailhead so that you can go hiking. And we're like, this is just great. Like, awesome spot. You're surrounded by forest the way you want it. You're not really looking at anybody else. You're not looking at somebody else's tent and stuff like that. So things were, you know, pretty normal at first. And, you know, when we take my daughter camping, we always like to make jokes about, you know, seeing Bigfoots and like, you know, looking out for them and stuff like that. So, you know, we're just like joking around, like, oh, look, is that a Bigfoot over there? And all this kind of stuff. And so it starts to, you know, dusk comes up, and we start our fire, and we're hanging out by the fire, and we cook our dinner, and then we're just hanging out there. And I keep looking over at the part of the forest that's just like outside of where our campground is, and or our campsite is, and I'm looking at it, and I'm just like, I see something like really weird. And then my daughter's like, yeah, she's like, I see like 2 red things right there, like glowing. And I'm like, yeah. I was like, what is that? It's like, you know, and as we're like, well, let's walk a little bit and see if they move or anything. And they didn't move at all. They just stayed in the same spot. And at this point, I mean, it's where they are is like a pretty dense part of the forest. And I'm like, well, we're not going to go walking through there at night, you know, we're not going to go in there and check it out. So we're kind of just watching them, and they just didn't move, and they just stayed there. And then they just vanished all of a sudden. And we're like, okay, all right, well, they're gone. And we're like, I don't know. We're like, maybe somehow there's like a car way over in the forest, and that's just its taillights or something like that. You know, we're like, you know, who knows? Maybe that's what's going on. So we don't think much of it. And then we're just, again, sitting around the fire having fun. And then at the exact same moment, I look to where our tent is, and then behind our tent is another, just, you know, it's very thick forest back there. And I'm looking over there, and so is my daughter. And both of us at the same time, we go, what was that? And I was like, did you see something? And she's like, yeah. She's like, I saw something like move between those 2 trees, like almost like run between it. And I was like, yeah. I was like, I thought I saw something almost like on the tree, like about 5 feet up in the tree, jump down and go hide behind that other tree. And she's like, yeah. She's like, that's kind of what I saw. She's like, but I thought it was still on the ground on the other side. It looked like it just ran over. And I'm like, okay, yeah, that's a little weird. So we just continue, you know, to have a good time, and we're like sitting there. And after that, of course, we're on a little bit more alert, and we're kind of like watching around, but didn't see anything, didn't hear anything. And we just enjoyed the rest of our night. And so we finally decided to call it a night. And we get in the tent, and we have this, you know, 3-person tent. And so I always sleep closest to the opening, and then my partner sleeps in the middle, and then my daughter sleeps on the far side. So we go to bed. And this night, my partner and my daughter are on like a snoring seesaw. It's like when one of them is snoring, the other one's quiet, and then as soon as the other one quiets down, the other one starts snoring.
Uh-huh.
And it is driving me absolutely crazy. I couldn't sleep. I was like, I cannot sleep with you 2 snoring. So I'm just dead awake. I'm just like laying there completely awake. And I have this really bad tendency. When I sleep in tents, I use like an inflatable pad that I sleep on. But I always slide down on this pad. So I always end up with my feet like kind of sticking, like pushing against the bottom of the tent. Or not this, I guess that would be the side of the tent. So I always have this problem where I always end up, no matter what, always against the side of the tent and on either my side or my feet. So that happened again that night. And so I'm just laying there because I could not sleep. I hear from that area, from behind the tent where my daughter and I had thought we'd saw something, I just hear it like a snap, a very loud snap, like something had snapped like a branch. And so I'm just like, okay, well, that could be anything. You know, you're out in the forest. That could be anything moving around. And so I'm laying there, and then I don't even remember what time it was. It was definitely after midnight, but I'm laying there, and as my feet are kind of like pushing out the side of the tent, I feel something push my foot, push one of my feet like inwards, like not crazy forceful, but enough to like move my leg. And I was like, oh, okay. And I'm sitting there and I'm like, all right, well, maybe some sort of animal brushed by, right? Maybe some sort of animal brushed by and brushed the tent. But I could feel it. It was like something like, because it was the bottom of my foot, like right where the ball of my feet is, and just like pushed it in. And I'm like, okay, well, that can literally be anything. And again, I'm not hearing anything. So I'm like, you know, I don't really hear anything. So, okay. And then the next thing that happened, I don't really know like how to describe it. So I'm going to try my best, but I'm laying there. So I'm facing, so after that happens, I turn on my side and I'm facing my partner who's in the middle of the tent. And I'm pressed up again against like the entrance to the tent. I feel something push into the tent and touch my shoulder. And it felt like a hand, because it didn't like fully grab me, but it felt like something was kind of starting to cup my shoulder. And it pushed in on my shoulder. And then, so that obviously really freaked me out. What I do next is I flip back over to look and see what is going on. And as I flip over, I see nothing but darkness. And this night, it was like, you know, when the moonlight's coming through your tent, you know, you can still kind of see things when you're out there. So it hadn't been like a pitch black night. The moon was out enough that I was able to see. But as I turn over onto my left side, and I see nothing but darkness. I can't see the tent. I can't see anything. I just get this overwhelming sense that like something is about to try and really harm me. And I like those feelings I was telling you about when I was younger and I was in the room with the shadow people, how it was like, you know, uncomfortable energy. This wasn't like that. This was something I've never felt before in my entire life up until then and since. It was just this sense that I was in mortal danger. That feeling hit right as I'm turning over. I see this darkness. And then there's a hand. This hand comes shooting out of the darkness. And it reaches towards me. It extends its fingers. And it's a hairy hand. And it's, to be honest, it happened so fast that it's like I only have a couple flashes of what it looked like in my mind. But this thing extends its fingers as if someone's, you know, if you're really reaching for something. And then and as it does that, I scream, and pardon my language, but I scream, "What the fuck?" And I back up into my partner. Like I'm pushing myself on the ground as fast as I can away from this thing. And as I do that, I watch its fingers recoil, and then it just pulls it back. And then I lose my mind. And she's like, what's going on? I'm like, something just tried to get in the effing tent. Something just tried to get in the tent. And I'm just shaking and I'm freaking out because I don't know what just happened. And she's like, you're just like having a bad dream. And I'm like, no, I have not been asleep all night because the two of you were snoring. The funny thing is, my daughter during all of this does not wake up. I scream, "What the F?" in the middle of the night in the forest and say something's trying to get in the tent. She's out cold. She's not even waking up. So I'm just like, you will sleep through anything. Like, you know.
Bless her. Yeah.
Yeah, but after I screamed that and after it recoiled, my vision cleared up and I could see the tent again. And I could see everything that was in there. But this hand, it was maybe 1.5 feet from my face. Again, it's like as soon as it recoiled and it disappeared, I could see the tent. So I'm just completely freaked out, but I'm trying not to make it over dramatic during this time, because it's like, I don't want to freak them out, obviously. And my brain is still trying to process like what's just happened. So I'm just laying there. So I always sleep with this in a tent, and anytime we're out, I always have this like giant machete that I keep with me. So I just grab this machete and I pull it out of its sheath, and I literally have this thing on my chest, holding it all night as I sit there on my side, just facing that side of the tent and looking. And I did not sleep at all that night. The rest of the night, I did not sleep. So the morning comes and I'm just like, all right, like, let's just try to think about this rationally. Like, what happened last night? I was like, there's nothing could get in the tent without coming through the tent, right? Like opening the tent. And I hadn't noticed it at that moment when everything happened, because I never thought to like look at it. But when I wake up in the morning, the tent is unzipped, but it's not unzipped that much. It's honestly only unzipped maybe like 3 inches, 4 inches. Like, and so, and it's kind of on the side of the opening that it's unzipped. And I'm like, okay, well, maybe I just didn't like fully unzip it or anything. So I go out and I get out of the tent, and I'm just like, all right, I'm looking around. Like, there's finally daylight. I'm going to look around for stuff. There's nothing. It's like, there's no footprints. There's nothing there. I can't find anything. Everything looks exactly the way we left it. But I didn't notice this until I went to get back into the tent. But we always put the rain fly down just in case to be safe. And the tent lines that hold the rain fly to the ground that you stake in,
Mm-hmm.
It was no longer staked in. The stake was gone and it was out. So it had been pulled out of the ground, and that was detached. Also the part where it kind of, you go up to the top of the tent where the rain fly kind of attaches there. Part of it there had been detached as well and was not no longer attached to like the frame of the tent. So that was just really weird to me, because I was like, I staked this thing down good last night. There was no wind. There was no wind. There was no wind, no weather that would have like blown that out of the ground. So I'm pretty freaked out, and I'm just like, okay, well, don't freak them out, because we want to still have like a good day and go hike. So we do a hike on Mount Rainier and stuff like that. And then we come back for the second night, and we're hanging out, and nothing. We don't see anything, no glowing red things. We don't see anything moving in the forest. We don't hear anything, nothing, no branches snapping, nothing like that. But as we're burning our firewood that night, we're sitting around the fire, and I'm like, oh no. And I was like, we're using all the firewood tonight. I was like, we don't have any left. I was like, I wanted to make one in the morning for breakfast. I was like, we're not going to have any more firewood for the morning. And we're like, oh, well, that really stinks. And so, we go to bed, and I've got my machete right there. And as we're going to bed, and again, I don't recommend anybody do this, because this is not a safe thing to do, but I was just so freaked out. But I tied the zippers on our tent together with my shoelace to make sure that they couldn't be opened in the middle of the night. And my partner's just like, what are you doing? I was like, I'm not taking any risks. I'm not taking any risks. And the thing is, I did not tell them about what I saw. I did tell them that something pushed my foot in the night, and that I felt something kind of push against me on my shoulder. But I didn't tell them the other part, because I didn't really know what to say. I was like, I'm just going to sound crazy. Like, they're going to be like, you're totally crazy. And so I didn't tell them about that part. So she thinks I'm crazy because I'm tying the tent shut, to make sure nothing happens. But I lay there for most of the night, and I just can't sleep. But nothing, no noise, no weird feelings, no impending doom, nothing like that. And I finally fall asleep, maybe around like 2 or 3 in the morning, I finally fall asleep. But I woke up pretty quickly, because I'm like, great. I'm like, I have to go to the bathroom. And I'm like, I am not walking all the way down, up to where the bathrooms are, after that happened in the middle of the night. And I'm laying there trying to hold it as long as I can. And finally, I'm just like, I can't hold it any longer. So I get out of the tent and I walk over to the forest line that's, surrounding our campground right there. And so I, let myself go there on the forest line. It's not far from where like our fire was and stuff like that. And then I go back to sleep, and I wake up in the morning, and then I go outside and I look, I'm like, oh man, we can't make a fire. But then I look over to where I had gone to the bathroom and laying there, and I know they weren't there from the night before, because I notice things, I pay attention to things that are around me, and I always scope things out whenever we go places. So I know they weren't there from the night before, especially because that's also right where I went to the bathroom. There's 3 logs, not like logs like, the campground house cut up, for you to burn, just 3 logs that look like they've been broken, at some point from a larger tree, just stacked right there, sitting like 2 on the bottom, 1 on top, sitting there right next to where we were keeping our fire, because that was where we were keeping the firewood before, the stuff that we had bought from the campground. And there's just these 3 logs sitting there, and I'm just like, where did these things come from? Like, how did these get here? So we used them to make the fire that morning, and that was really nice. I don't know if maybe it felt bad and it decided to leave me a little present, but that's kind of how I felt at the time, because I was like, wow, that's just really weird that these came out of nowhere. And yeah, they, I also mentioned to you in my email, it was very strange because the next day, my partner, she's like, I don't feel good that second day, after the first night that it happened. Like, and she's like, I don't feel good. And she never gets sick. She never has anything. Like, she doesn't even get the common cold. Like, she just says like the best immune system. And she's like, I don't know. I don't feel good. I'm feeling really off today. And I'm like, okay. 2 days after we got back, I was on the road for my job. And unfortunately, I was in an area where I had no service for about 4 hours. And when I come back to, she has left me all these voicemails, and she's like, I'm going to the ER. I can't move my face. Like, half of my face is drooping. I don't know what's going on. And she's young. I mean, she's 29. She's, shouldn't have any issues like that. And she goes to the doctor, and they were running all these things, and like, we can't find anything wrong with you. Your vitals are good. We're not like seeing any like nerve damage or anything like that, but she can't move like half of her face. And finally they just say, oh, well, you must have Bell's palsy. Like, you must just have Bell's palsy, and it must have just like come out of nowhere, and you've gotten it. So it was just very strange to me that like the next day after that happened, she suddenly became ill. And then just a couple of days later, she's having to go to the ER. But that, like I said, that experience with this hand coming out of the darkness, it's made it so hard for me now to like hike. And even, like I said, when I was still doing that job up until where I would, travel through the mountains and stuff like that, up until September of this year, I was doing that. And as I had mentioned before, I did that job for a number of years, and I would stop at night and just go anywhere. And I've never had a problem with the darkness, even after like growing up in that house and dealing with all that stuff. I've never been one to be scared of the dark or really have problems with it. I have always enjoyed being in the woods, having it be totally dark, and just like being a part of it and just like listening. And I couldn't do what I used to do anymore. Like I said, I used to go like hike in a little ways at night and just like, stand there and kind of like absorb it. And I kept trying to do that, and I would get 10 feet in and I would just panic, and I would just go running out, and I would freak out. And it got to the point where it was like, I stopped even doing like my little solo hikes that I would do during that job on my own, because even just being out there by myself, it's almost like I could feel it, that feeling again. And so it's just really, I don't know, it's just left this impression on me it's just so hard to describe.
Have you gone camping in a tent since then?
No, we have not gone camping in a tent since then. I want to. I'm not going to let this be something where it keeps me out. of the woods or anything like that. But I have a feeling the first night might be maybe a little rough when I go back out there. I honestly, I really want to go back to that campground, to that exact spot. But unfortunately, we don't know if it's going to open this year. Apparently there were some landslides near the area. So the area currently is closed and they don't know if they'll reopen it this year. Or at least that's what, they're telling us. This is why it's closed. But no, we haven't been back camping since. We've been on hikes, but they've all been, we get there morning and, we're not there when there's no sun up or anything like that. So we've been on some hikes, but no tent camping since then.
How big was the hand?
It's hard to tell because it was just so quick. It was such a flash. Like the whole visual of it was maybe like 3 seconds, but it wasn't incredibly large, to be honest. Which, thinking about it afterwards, that's why I was just like, well, like maybe it wasn't, Sasquatch because it wasn't a super large hand. But I mean, if I had to guess, I'd say like, across maybe like 6.5 inches, maybe 6.5, 7. I don't know, which I guess would still be probably a fairly large hand. But for me, it was just the fingers weren't very fat. They were a little skinnier than I expected.
But you did say that you saw hair all over it, right?
I saw hair. The other thing that sticks out in my mind, there was 2 things. The thumb really freaked me out. I could tell it was a left hand because of the placement of the thumb, but the thumb, it didn't seem like it was in the right spot for the hand. I guess when you're thinking about like a human hand, it almost felt like a little pushed back and up, which sounds kind of weird, but like the thumb was the thing that was just the weirdest looking, because I could see that because again, I could tell it was a left hand because of the thumb was on top, right? But the thumb was pushed down a little bit. The fingers were fairly skinny. I could tell there was hair hanging over them, but not so much towards the fingertips. There wasn't a lot of hair there. It was more, I could see the hand, and then I'd say just a little bit down the forearm, because I know I could see down the forearm because on the side where the thumb is, like if you went down to like the base of your thumb and went a few inches back, there was hair missing and the skin looked different. So I don't know if that was like a scar or something, but it was missing a little bit of fur. I couldn't even guess like how much or like how long because it happened so fast. But it's like, because when I see this thing, because I can still see it in my head, like if I think about it, it's like, but the most distinguished thing is that weird looking thumb and just that patch of fur missing with some weird skin. But the hair hung over the arm, like the forearm, it hung over that a lot. And then all the way up until the digits started. And then after that, it wasn't really hanging over the edge of the fingers, but I also didn't see any fingernails.
And what about skin color?
Well, so the hair, whatever it was, I could tell it was a little difficult because it was like I'm looking at blackness and like just total black, and it's coming out of there. So it looked black, but on the edges of like where the hair was like kind of hanging over, I could on the top side of the hand where the thumb was, I could see some like dark red highlights in it. And so it was really dark, what I thought was black, but maybe it could have just been a dark brown with like some little, like just tiniest reddish highlights on the top of the hand. It was still, again, it was kind of hard to tell because it's like I'm comparing it against the blackness behind it, but that's what I saw.
So, Patrick, just bear with me here because I just want to parcel everything out because my mind is just trying to visualize this. So the first incident with the foot is through the fabric of the tent, and so is the hand on your shoulder, right? Those are both through the fabric of the tent.
Correct, yes. Yeah, I could tell that there was the tent between us.
Okay. And then, so now we go to the hand. It is coming in at you, but did did it unzip the tent a little bit? Okay, let me back up for a second. You've got the two different zip ups for a door of a tent, right? Like you've got the one where it's totally closed off, you can't see out, and then you've got the other one where you can drag that inside liner down, and then you have more airflow, right? And a bug screen essentially. So
Right.
Was that in fact what was going on? Was it all zipped up, or was the bug screen kind of open and you had more air coming through?
No, so we had closed off the front part as well. So like that outer layer, that was zipped as well. Because we typically, unless it's just like, unless we're camping like desert or something like that, where it's going to be very warm, we still close it off entirely. So when I went to bed, both of those were both closed. And
completely zipped up together. The zippers were essentially meeting.
Right, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, they were both zipped up and at the same spot. And it was, on the door, like I said, on the door to the tent, it was kind of on the side of it. So not like the zipper was at the bottom.
Right.
It was on the side, which is what, I don't know why I do that, but I usually zip it there.
And I'm assuming that, maybe this is a twofold thing with the ladies, snoring, is it drew, they were seemingly already around, if we're going what has gone on before all of this and you guys went to bed. It sounds like they were already watching you. I'm just wondering if the snoring was maybe annoying them or interesting them, whatever was, going on there. So your thought is then that in between these snorers going off, maybe you don't hear the fact that it unzipped both zippers essentially and then reached in at you.
I don't know what other explanation there is other than maybe I'm just totally crazy. But because with the direction it came from was kind of that way, towards the door. Again, there's not much space. We're talking like 1.5 feet, 2 feet.
Right.
There's not much space between me and it. So it's like it came from that direction, and that's what I'm thinking, because I'm wondering if because of the snoring and then just like everything else. And of course I'm trying to listen for over, on the other side of the tent where that snap came from. I'm focused on that.
Right.
I'm thinking about over there because that's where I heard it. I don't know if it somehow snuck around to the other side, and since they're snoring, because it was loud, like they're snoring, I'm just like, they're going to wake up the campground. Like we're not even near anybody and they're going to wake everybody up. Maybe I didn't hear it. And that's why, like I said, with the tent stake being pulled out and then the rain fly detached a little bit, I don't know. It's just like that. Maybe it was trying to slowly or quietly open it. That's all I can think of. But that's why I've listened to quite a bit of your show and I've, read some stuff. I've never heard of a Sasquatch trying to open somebody's tent in the middle of the night. I don't know if you've ever had anybody tell you that.
I honestly don't remember one. It doesn't mean that my memory also can be horrible like yours. But this one is pretty damn unique, Patrick, I would say. That would really freak me out too. I got to tell you. It would be enough to see, like if you had glanced over to see the zippers opening. That's a worst case scenario if that's a person doing that, you could be in mortal danger then too. You don't know what people are capable of there. And that's a lot,
I would say, to be honest with you, just to throw this in there, at first when I started hearing the snaps and stuff, and when that thing pushed my foot, I'm thinking, oh, frat boys are messing with us.
Right.
Maybe they decided in the middle of the night to go mess with somebody. But we were just so far away from them at that point. And then after I saw the hand, I was like, well, unless they, are, movie magic experts,
right.
I'm thinking that's not them.
Right. It's the guys from FX, and they're just testing the Bigfoot forearm and handout on you. Isn't that nice of them? Yeah,
exactly. Very nice.
That would take care of that. So I find it pretty damn cool that you needed the firewood the next morning, and not only do you have it, but it's laid in the exact same spot where the store-bought firewood was laid the entire time. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, it was like after that happened, because when it first, in the middle of the night, I'm thinking this thing wants to take me, it wants to take somebody, or it's just, or I put it in my email, or maybe it's just overly inquisitive, right? Maybe it was an adolescent who was really over inquisitive about the snoring. But as soon as I saw that, I was like, well, this is interesting. Maybe it's kind of being like, hey, sorry, didn't mean to scare you that much. But I don't know what it would expect if it's reaching into your tent. Because the other thing I did is that second night we were there, I mentioned there's that trailhead across from the camp spot. that second night when we got back to the camp after hiking, I told them, I was like, hey, I want to go up this trail a little bit. I'm just kind of go on my own. And they're like, that's fine. Like, we're tired. We don't want to go anyways. And to be honest, my thought was kind of like, I'm going to put myself out there. Like, I'm going to go down this trail a little bit and just see, like, if this thing wants to show itself to me or anything like that. And so I went down that trail, and I probably only went like half a mile in or something like that. So I didn't go like super far. But I hung out there for a while, but nothing, because I was thinking like, well, maybe if it brought the wood, maybe it's not a malicious, creature, and maybe it will show itself to me. But I didn't see or hear anything, trying that. And I went at dusk when, the sun was setting, because I was like, well, maybe if it's just a little, in between. I was like, I'm not going out there in the middle of the night. Like, I'm not going to go, not doing that. But I did try that, but got nothing. Didn't really see or hear anything on that attempt.
Maybe between tone of voice and volume and using the F word, it really drove it home that you were not pleased with what it was doing. It's like, no, you cannot take the noisy filling in the burrito. Get out of here. Stop it.
Yeah, exactly. Maybe that's what did it. Maybe they just don't like cursing. Maybe that's,
you offended it.
You got to do that. Yeah.
It's like, oh, Patrick used the F word. Better go get him some firewood for the morning.
Oh, he's like, sorry, buddy.
Oh my gosh. No. Okay. I'm laughing about it, but honestly, that would scare the shit out of me, if I have to be honest with you. I don't know how I would process that either. I would hazard to say, because I like to think that, yes, I want to have that experience. Of course I do. But there are things that's not a subtle thing. If y'all out there listening to this, just think about you are Patrick, and there is that hand coming in, and how close did it get to you, did you say?
A foot and a half, maybe, from my face. It was, because it felt like it was reaching right for my head, which really freaked me out more than anything. But if it's reaching in, it has no idea.
Okay, so that's the other thing. Do you think
Shannon,
that?
Sorry, I was.
Go ahead.
Oh, go ahead. No, go ahead.
Do you think then that it did know exactly where it was reaching? Do you think it? I don't know if it could have seen somehow in there. Or,
I don't know.
Or just happened to, be your noggin that it was close to?
It's hard to tell. For me, it was weird that it pushed my foot and then it felt my shoulder. It almost felt like I was being sized up.
Right.
Like it was like trying to figure out how big I was.
It had a pretty good guess of where your head was then. Oh my goodness. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, that's all I could think, because when it touched me on the shoulder through the tent, it didn't fully cup it, but I could feel as if something was starting to curl and like kind of touch and, cup it a bit, but it didn't fully do it. So I don't know if it was just like sizing me up to figure out how big I am. And I'm not a very big dude. So one of those things would pick me up and carry me like a rag doll. So I don't know. And the other thing, Shannon, I know that you've mentioned this a number of times on the podcast. It's like, for me, I've always been in the camp that Sasquatch are essentially like an animal, right? And I've wanted it to be that. I want them to be just like some sort of, primate that was just undiscovered. But the only other thing I could think is, it's just like, it came out of the darkness. Like why did I see darkness? Like, why could I not see the tent like I was before? Because when I was looking around before, I could see everything. And I know, and I know a lot of people don't like it, and I've never been a fan of it either, but people talk about like these portals that they open sometimes. And I'm like, was it opening up? Cause like, I don't know. Cause again, the opening on the tent, 3 to 4 inches open, a hand that size, could it fit through that?
Okay, so now I see what you're getting at, because at first I thought you meant that it was just filling the front opening with darkness. You mean that when this all essentially began, the darkness enveloped the entire tent?
Yeah, everything within my eyesight. So even my peripheral was just dark, just black.
And how bright is the moon on this night? Pretty bright?
It was pretty bright, because it was like, I remember being in the tent, and it was just like, I could, see pretty much everything, all of everything going on in the tent. Like I can see them. Not as if it's daytime, obviously.
Right.
But the moon was pretty bright, and it was, and where our campsite was, there wasn't like trees completely covering over us, so there was a bit of an opening, so moonlight was able to kind of get in on our campsite. So it was still fairly light, because again, it's like it was totally different, the darkness that I was seeing compared to what like the rest of the night, because I've been up all night. I've been looking around and listening and just laying there trying to get to sleep, and it was just completely different. It wasn't until I flipped over after I got that feeling that the darkness started.
I mean, unless a few of them moved in, kind of at the same time, but you would think that they couldn't block out that much light. I mean, it's a whole series of things that you'd have to think,
I
like
didn't even
cover.
think of that.
But, where would the moon be at that point of night, right? I don't know.
Yeah, it was after midnight. I know that. It was probably, it was probably, I don't know, somewhere I'd say between like 1 to 3 in the morning, maybe. I never looked at my phone or anything, or my watch or anything to really see what time it was.
Right, so the moon probably wouldn't be
I didn't think about
overhead.
that, though.
Yeah.
If they were blocking the moonlight from hitting the tent.
Because, what if the snap was a separate one, and then the one at your, foot was a separate one, and then the one at your shoulder, and even maybe your head. I mean, who knows how many, if it was just the one, and there is something very strange going on, because that's a really good point. Could a hand that sounds pretty darn big to me, because you already said it looked 6 inches across, and then the opening was 3 to 4 inches.
Right, exactly. Yeah. And so it's like, I don't mean it would have to be, and you would feel like if it, and that's the other thing to me, it's like, I never felt, except for the pushing of my foot, and then I felt the pressing on my shoulder, and I could tell that like the top of the tent was moving a little bit when that happened. But other than that, I didn't feel any movement of the tent. And I feel like it has to be pretty talented to unzip that thing and take those off without moving the tent at all.
Well, and you said the rainfly stake was completely yanked out and everything.
Yeah, completely pulled out, and it was dry. So like it was, it's sometimes if you're in like wetter or looser dirt, those things can wiggle out,
Yes.
But this was just like the campground was pristine, like perfect ground. Like you pound that in, it's not coming out unless you like pulled it out,
And if that thing was, even if you take a hand that size and you try to, like if you're doing like a sock puppet show or something, and you try to make your hand smaller, which you can do. You said the thumb was weird, so maybe that adds to something that they can do to make their hands fit into a small. This is way like crazy conjecture, but maybe it could have gotten its hand in there somehow. But you'd think that motion of it shoving its hand in there would have been shaking the wall of the tent and all of these things. It just seems like all of a sudden it's just coming at you, and you didn't hear the zipper come down or anything.
No, I didn't hear it. I didn't hear the zipper at all, but like, I'm pretty meticulous about things, and like I'm a little overcautious, I think my partner would say. Whenever we're doing something, I'm always thinking, hey, what could go wrong and what could happen? So we got to make sure we're prepared for it. So when I'm in a tent, like I always make sure I zip it up really well. And so, yeah, I know it was like totally zipped, but again, I didn't feel the tent move other than those things for like any sort of zipping. But to your point, it's with the snoring and, I'm trying to listen in on the forest. Maybe I was just so zoned out on those that I just didn't even, maybe they were smart enough to know, like you distract them on this side and then, you go on the other side.
Jeez. I don't know. This is kind of a freaky one.
Yeah, it's definitely something where, again, I just love being out in the woods and stuff too much to let it stop me from going out there. But I don't know about being out there alone ever anymore. I don't think I'd really want to do that.
I mean, what would it have done if it had gotten a hold of you? Have you thought about that?
Oh yeah, I've thought a lot about that, and I don't know. It's like, I mean, it would be all conjecture, but it's just like, and I've often wondered, like, maybe I wasn't the one they were after. I mean, my daughter's 15, so she's fairly petite, and my partner is, she's a little bit on the smaller side. She's about 4'10", so she's a small lady. So I thought often, like, maybe I wasn't the one they were after. Maybe they thought it'd be easy to snatch somebody smaller.
Yeah.
You know, I don't know. Maybe they were after them or one of them or whatever. And but I've thought a lot about, maybe what would have happened. And that's why I go back to, I gave it its chance, really. Like, I went out there at dusk down that trail. If it were still around, it had its chance to just run up. And I had nothing. I didn't even take my machete with me on that walk. So I had nothing to protect myself. I didn't even take a backpack. I just went on this little walk. So I don't really have anything. So that's why I wonder, like, if it really wanted to take me, if it wanted to take me, it had a second chance. But that's just, that's assuming that this thing's in that area all the time, just, hanging out.
So this possible infrasound situation with your normally very healthy partner, how long did that last? How long did her face have this paralysis situation?
So it was about a month and a half almost 2 months actually, until her movement returned in that half of her face. Until then, she couldn't move it. And again, the doctor said, like, well, there's no reason. Like, there's no reason this should be happening. And so I guess when that happens, they just say, oh, it's Bell's palsy.
Bell's palsy, right?
Any
other symptoms besides the face paralysis?
The days afterwards, she was just crazy tired. And like she said, she just felt off. I think she had a headache that day we were hiking the next day. I think she did have a headache. And, we're from Colorado. We're from high altitude. So when we go up into the mountains, we don't usually have problems. But just really just not feeling good, and just her body didn't feel good. And again, like I said, it's very unusual for her. She doesn't even get sick. She got COVID and she didn't even really get that sick. So it was just, but nearly 2 months later is finally when she was able to move her face again.
And also a little strange that neither you or your daughter had any symptoms like that.
Yeah.
I mean, the timing is at least odd, Yeah,
well, that's the thing. Like, this could be totally separate. It's like, this could have absolutely nothing to do with it. It could have just been coincidental. But it's just, to me, it's like, obviously we've heard of, maybe they possibly use infrasound, and then that's the other thing. It's like, was infrasound used, and that messed with me a little bit, so I couldn't really see very well, and that's why there was darkness, and then it affected her as well. And my daughter, who's completely out, just has no effect.
Okay.
And, she's completely unaware.
That
of
is
anything
interesting.
Going on.
Maybe the perceived darkness was in fact a side effect of the infrasound for you. That is very interesting. Good point.
Yeah, that's the only thing that's not the only thing, but that's just one thing that's stuck in my brain. Like, well, maybe that's almost a technique to sort of disable you for a second, and disorient you. So that way you can, that would be a good predatory tactic.
Oh, that'd be incredible. You're like, okay, vignette on. He cannot see. Okay, move in. That would be amazing.
Yeah. Like, we got him.
Yeah, that would freak me out. This is on the no list. There it is. Hand into the tent. And after already the poking of the foot, and you and your poor feet. I mean, you just can't get away from this stuff, right?
Yeah, I'm just like never, I don't know. I'm just going to sleep in a ball from now on. I'm not, I'm just going to curl up in a little ball and, suck on my thumb at night while I'm camping until the morning comes.
Fetal position 100% of the time. Yeah, exactly. You're like roly-poly time.
It's very interesting. I don't know. Like I said, I'm not going to let it stop me from running out in the woods, but it has given me a heightened sense of paying a lot more attention now when we're hiking. And I guess, for years I was always like, even back on the Bailey hike and stuff like that, I always just say, like, all I want is just like see one of these things. I just really want to see one of these things. And it had never occurred to me that, like, maybe you don't want to see one. Maybe they're not as, cuddly and friendly as we, portray them to be. Not talking any smack about the Sasquatch here. If you're trying to survive out there, you can't exactly, just be super friendly to everybody, especially if you're trying to stay away from humans, who are the worst thing on this planet. I don't blame them.
After seeing the hand, right? Just hypothetically speaking, would you want to see the rest of what was attached to that hand and the forearm?
The thing is, it's like, I don't want to. I need to. Like, I really need to see one. And I felt that way before. I feel that way even more now. I mean, the main reason I need to is I just kind of want to know, like, well, you're not crazy, like that, that actually happened and that was one, or, maybe it wasn't one. Maybe I see one and, first time I see one, I'm gonna be like, show me your hands. I need to see those hands real quick, buddy. I need to see what those look like so I can, tell if that was you that night, or another creature. But I really feel strongly. I feel like I need to see one. I need to know. I don't need a picture. I don't need anything. I want to see it, and I want to know, because I believe that they're out there, especially after this. But like, how can you know for sure off of such a brief interaction? It's like I would like to see one, but I'd kind of like to see one from a little bit of a distance. I don't really need to be, I don't want to wake up and it's standing over me.
Yeah. You're like, I do, but not that damn close. I mean, okay, so you mentioned other creatures, but to you, what else could that have been? You saw that thing super close. You saw the size, you saw the hair, the fur, whatever we want to call that. You saw the weird thumb, the weird skin in that little area. What else could that have been?
I don't know, and that's why I go to Sasquatch. That's the only thing I can think, because any other creature, I can't come up with any other creature that would be. There's nothing. I mean, certainly nothing, in the natural world as we know it. There's nothing that would have that. I did kind of like for a while start thinking like, man, maybe that was like a dog man, but from what, and you mentioned it, and, dogmen don't seem to be that shy. I'm not sure he's waiting until I'm in the tent. But, but I don't know what, I don't know if I've ever heard anybody describe like a dogman hand or anything, but that's the only other creature in my mind that I could possibly think, unless there's some other kind of supernatural, paranormal thing that disguises itself, in that manner. That's the only thing other thing I can think, but I don't know. I can't come up with anything.
And what do you think the girls are going to say after they hear this?
I did give my partner a warning today. I said, listen, I'm going to kind of drop a little bit of something that happened that you don't know about, one of my stories. And she was like, wait, is this from like when you were younger? She's like, I feel like I know all your like stories from like your old house and like all that stuff. She's like, and I was there for the everything else. And she was like, did something happen? She's like, did something happen when I was there that you didn't tell me about? And I was like, yeah, something kind of extra happened that I just left out. And she's like, just tell me right now. And I was like, well, you can hear it in the podcast.
Oh man.
Because, I hope we'll still get, both of them back out there after they hear this. My daughter, I don't think it'll faze her. She's pretty fearless. I think if anything, she'll be like, we got to get back out there.
Right? Oh my goodness. No, your poor partner, she's going to go. She was probably hoping and fishing for it to be one of your experiences when you were a young man and she wasn't around. Unfortunately, it was very, very close to her also. So, yeah.
Exactly. So,
yeah.
We'll see how she feels about it.
But I could see where, as a father, and then as somebody that has someone they love, and you try to go out and do things with them, you're just trying to protect them and you don't want to scare them, because that's scary. I'm sorry, but that is a scary thing.
Yeah, and it's definitely that. I didn't want to, like scare them unnecessarily, but honestly, it was also like, that was June of last year, and it wasn't until January this year I even got it up to be like, what, I think I should reach out and maybe tell this story. And because I've been processing it this whole time and just seeing like, I want to just think about it more and just, try and figure it out in my own mind. But that's why I really wanted to, reach out to you and tell you about it, because I love your show. I think you do just such an awesome job with like talking to people, and you're so open about it, because it's like, it's hard a lot of times to tell people that aren't, that don't believe in this stuff, or at least aren't open to this stuff. You tell I tell most people this and they're like, oh yeah, you're crazy. You were just dreaming. Like, this didn't happen. You're just, that's not true. So it's like, I've honestly just been processing it since then. And that next day, I didn't even know it was a drink. I was just like kind of in a daze when we were hiking and just trying to take my mind off of it.
Last question for you, Patrick. You said, I know already, that it was pretty dry around there. Was there any other sign, footprints, anything? Not that you needed any more of a wake-up call than that hand and everything else that went down that night, but any other sign around the tent, physically wise from them besides leaving the wood?
No, and that when I got out, and that's when I realized about all the rain fly and stuff like that. I went around the entire tent. No, it was just so dry, and there just wasn't much loose dirt either to really make impressions. You couldn't even really see our footprints from walking around the camp. But there was just I couldn't find a single thing. I even walked over into the woods where we had my daughter and I had both at the same time seen something move between the trees. And I did everything. I looked at the trees to even see if hey, maybe a piece of hair or some clumps of hair got caught on some bark or something, And I looked around and I couldn't find a sign of anything. It didn't look like I said, everything was exactly the way we left it in camp, and it didn't even look like anybody had been in there. The one thing I didn't forget to mention though is that the second night, somebody ended up taking a camp spot next to us. So I don't know if maybe that's what kept it away the second night, or if they were just done with the whole thing. But somebody did move into the campsite next to us the next night. But yeah, other than that, no signs of anything else roaming through the camp.
Gosh, this makes me miss the woods. Sometimes I just sit on these chats and I hate the desert. I love it, but I hate it. I so miss it. And I know exactly what you're talking about because my dad used to live in southern Washington and would go out to Packwood for the car shows. There's always car shows out there. So I know the area that you're talking about, and oh my gosh, I love Washington State so much.
Oh, I know. We lived in Colorado, and then we lived in Texas for a little while, and then we moved to Oregon. And after being in the Pacific Northwest, it's we're not moving anywhere else. I'm from Arizona. I love the desert. I love desert hikes. I like camping out in the desert. I love it. But there's nothing like the forest up here. And it's people, I've all these people I've known that they're just there's no chance that something that large could live out there and we wouldn't know about it. And I'm come up to these forests, man. You can't see 10 feet in.
Yeah.
You could be, something could be standing 20 feet away from me on the trail, and I would have no idea because it is thick. And there are just so many parts that are just people do not go to and are, really unexplored. And it's just, in my mind, it's something could easily be out here without us knowing. There's just it's such a beautiful place. So the PNW is the only place for us. We really love Washington, and we think maybe at some point we'll kind of move up into kind of southern Washington because that's where we typically like to go hiking now that we've explored most of Oregon. But it's so amazing out here.
Well, if you run into anything else, maybe you see the right hand this time, make sure you get in touch with me, okay?
Get the full pair.
Yeah. Let's match it up. Let's see if it's the same offender here. No, but thank you for deciding to reach out, by the way.
Yeah, no, thank you so much for taking the time to listen to my stories. It's really nice because I've never actually said out loud that part. I think I mentioned in the email. I've told people kind of the other parts where you're getting pushed through the tent and stuff like that about that experience. But this was the first time that I ever even out loud said this. I've gone over it in my head a million times, but it's kind of nice to just get it out there because it's kind of hard when you just have an experience like that and you don't talk about it or tell anybody because it kind of festers inside of you.
I could definitely see where this one would fester. Anytime anything alters something that you love to do or you're more reticent to do it, then yeah, it's not really always the most positive thing. I think that you did have a confirmation experience. I don't know what else, like you said, that would have been or could have been that hand. But yeah, that would be extremely horrifying to have something, I mean, let's face it, 6 inches across on the hand, pretty big, pretty big. So yeah, you don't want to be battling with that thing, machete or not. And you hear people say, yeah. If I would have had an elephant gun, it may not have been enough. So I am sorry that it's kind of edited your outdoor activity. So hopefully you guys will get back into that.
Yeah, no, we definitely will. And definitely if, anything else pops up, I will definitely reach out and let you know. That experience, that's on my no list, now. I don't really want to go through that again. But again, I'd like to see one, if I happen to see one waltzing through the forest a little ways away, I'd be okay with that.
Yeah. It's always the oh yes I do, but ... right? There's all these
under my circumstances.
Yeah, we have caveats to these things. Don't reach into the burrito. Get out of here. Like let's do this during the day and at a distance, or with binoculars or something. I don't know, but no, Patrick, thank you so much. Please do keep in touch.
I will, definitely. Thank you so much, Shannon.
Well, I'm so-and-so. I was given this name by my parents. I've been to such and such a college. I've done these things in my profession. I produce a little biography. Buddha says, forget it. That's not true. That's some story. That's all gone. That's all past. I want to see the real you are now. Well, nobody knows who that is. Because we don't know ourselves except through listening to our echoes. Consulting our memories. But then there's a real you, and that again leads us back to this question. Who are you? That is the real you. We shall see how they play with this exam. By the cohorts to get you to come out of your shell and find out who you really are. First there is summer, and then there is spring. in his poem The Four Quartets, where he says, when you settle down in the train to read your newspaper and so on, you are not the same person who a little while ago left the platform. If you think you are linking your moments up in a chain. And this is what binds you to the wheel of birth and death. But when you know that every moment in which you are is the only moment, this comes into Zen. A master will say to somebody, get up and walk across the room. And he comes back and he says, where are your footprints? They've gone. So where are you? Who are you? When we are asked who we are, we usually give a kind of recitation of a history.